Iron Ghost? What is that? The call sign for the base daycare. Maybe you should change it to diaper duty. The words, sharp and dripping with condescension, sliced through the dry Coronado air. A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the assembled group of young hardened SEALs, each one eager to curry favor with their new commander, Rear Admiral Eleanor Vance. They looked at the target of her scorn, a man who seemed entirely out of place among them. He didn't react. Master Chief Petty Officer Liam Carter remained perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the distant target, his expression as unchanging as the steel of the rifle he held. There was no flicker of anger, no hint of shame. There was only a profound and unnerving calm. But when Fleet Admiral Thorne, observing from the climate-controlled silence of the command tower, saw the worn, almost faded trident insignia on Carter's chest and the specific way he cradled the stock of his M210 rifle, his eyes narrowed in deep, sudden recognition. He knew that stance. He knew that silence. If you believe a parent's quiet strength is the most powerful weapon of all, type legacy in the comments below. Admiral Vance was a legend in her own right, one of the first women to complete BUD/S and rise through the ranks of naval special warfare. She was granite-hard, brilliant, and utterly intolerant of anything she perceived as weakness. And as she paced before the firing line, her eyes landed on Carter like a predator spotting a limp in the herd. He was older than the rest, with threads of silver at his temples and the faint, etched lines of chronic exhaustion around his eyes that every parent of a young child knows intimately. He had been a last-minute substitute for a high-stakes marksmanship evaluation, pulled from a consultant role to fill a slot. To Vance, he looked soft, worn down, a relic of a bygone era. The modern battlefield doesn't wait for parent-teacher conferences, Master Chief, she continued, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Commitment is total. It is all-consuming. Or it is nothing. Do you understand me? The other operators, sculpted from years of relentless training and ambition, shuffled their feet, their silence a form of complicity. They saw what Vance saw, a man whose best days were a distant memory. Liam Carter's response was the epitome of professional deference, a quiet, simple, understood ma'am. He then turned his attention back to his rifle, methodically checking the chamber, his movements economical and fluid, a study in practiced efficiency. This infuriating lack of reaction only stoked Vance's disdain. She mistook his discipline for apathy, his silence for weakness. She saw a man who had lost his edge, and she was determined to make an example of him. The evaluation began. It wasn't a simple target shoot, it was the hostage gauntlet, a notoriously difficult stress test designed to separate the elite from the merely excellent. The scenario was a symphony of chaos, a labyrinth of pop-up targets, some hostile, some friendly, appearing at unpredictable intervals and ranges from 50 to 500 meters. To complicate matters, the entire course was flooded with disorienting strobe lights and the deafening cacophony of simulated explosions and automatic gunfire. One by one, the young SEALs took their turn, their movements explosive and aggressive. They were good, exceptionally good, posting scores that would be the envy of any military force on the planet. But the gauntlet took its toll. A microsecond of hesitation led to a winged friendly. A miscalculation in windage sent a round just wide of a long-distance hostile. From the observation deck, Admiral Vance watched with a critical eye, nodding curtly at the respectable, yet imperfect, results. She saw power, speed, and aggression. But she was about to witness precision. As Liam Carter stepped up to the line, a hush fell over the observers. He didn't explode into motion. Instead, he seemed to flow into his stance, a seamless union of man and weapon. He settled his feet, his posture becoming a perfect, unshakable foundation. His breathing slowed to a deep, rhythmic cadence, a metronome of absolute calm that seemed to warp time itself, creating a pocket of profound silence amidst the impending storm. It was his turn. The range officer's call of "threat is live" was swallowed by the immediate eruption of manufactured chaos. But through Liam's scope, there was no chaos. There was only math. A target at 75 meters, partially obscured by a hostage silhouette. His rifle cracked once, a sharp, surgical sound. A perfect T-box hit. Before the brass casing had even kissed the concrete, he was already transitioning. Two hostiles appeared simultaneously at 200 meters, visible for less than a second. A double tap, so fast the two shots sounded like one. Both targets fell, each with a single hole drilled through the dead center of the head. He moved with an unearthly fluidity, a ghost gliding through a storm. He didn't run, he flowed from one firing position to the next. The strobe lights didn't disorient him, they simply illuminated his next problem. The explosions didn't startle him, they were just background noise. The climax was a shot that would be talked about for years, a single hostile target appearing for a mere half-second behind a pane of simulated bulletproof glass, 500 meters away. A thread the needle shot. Liam exhaled, his trigger press imperceptible. A moment of silence, and then the distant, satisfying ping of steel. The timer buzzed. The range fell into a state of absolute, deafening silence. The scoreboard flashed, perfect score. Time, a new range record. The young SEALs stared, their jaws agape. Vance's cynical smirk had evaporated, replaced by a mask of pure, slack-jawed shock. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "No way. Run it again. Check the system." Before the range technician could respond, the heavy door to the observation tower swung open. Fleet Admiral Marcus Thorne descended the steel steps, his presence radiating an authority that dwarfed everyone else's. He was a 4-star admiral, a man who had seen combat in 3 different decades, and his face was a roadmap of wisdom and hard-won command. He walked past the frozen rear Admiral Vance without a single glance, his focus entirely elsewhere. He moved with purpose to the main control terminal, his old-school leather shoes making quiet, deliberate sounds on the concrete floor. Without a word, he typed in a high-level override code, his fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced familiarity. The main display screen, which had been showing the scoring data, flickered and changed. A personnel file appeared, stark and official against the blue background. The name read, Master Chief Petty Officer Liam Carter. Beside it, the call sign, Iron Ghost. And then Thorne brought up the service record. The narrator could have read it aloud, a litany of impossible courage. Unit, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Status, Inactive Reserve, Special Consultant, Tier 1 Asset. Mission Classifications, Redacted. Operation Scythe, Redacted. Task Force 11, Redacted. The list of blacked-out, top-secret operations scrolled on and on, a ghost's resume written in the ink of national security. The list of awards was even more staggering. Navy Cross with 2 gold stars, indicating 3 separate acts of valor second only to the Medal of Honor. Silver Star. Bronze Star with V for Valor. Purple Heart with 4 oak leaf clusters. The screen was a constellation of the nation's highest honors, each one representing a moment of extreme peril and unbelievable bravery. The assembled SEALs, men who lived and breathed the ethos of their community, stood in stunned, reverent silence. They were looking at a living myth. Thorne finally turned away from the screen, his gaze sweeping over the humbled operators before landing squarely on Admiral Vance, who looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. His voice was low, but it cut through the silence with the finality of a judge's gavel. "Admiral Vance," he began, his tone cold and precise, "this man's call sign isn't a joke born in a daycare. It was given to him by terrified enemy combatants in the mountains of the Hindu Kush, whispered over their radios because they never saw him coming. They called him the Iron Ghost because to complete his missions so deep and so sensitive that they could never be acknowledged, he was officially listed as killed in action on 3 separate occasions." Thorne took a step closer to Liam. "He became a ghost on our own rosters, a phantom in the system, so that men and women like you could have a navy to serve in, and a nation to come home to then." In a gesture that sent a shockwave through the entire command, Fleet Admiral Marcus Thorne, a 4-star officer, snapped to attention and rendered a crisp, perfect salute to the unassuming Master Chief. The story of that moment spread through the naval special warfare community like a shockwave. It traveled through the barracks at Coronado, echoed in the bars on Orange Avenue, and lit up encrypted forums where operators traded gossip. The legend of the quiet graying daycare dad, who had not only shattered a range record but had also received a salute from a fleet admiral, became instant folklore. It was a cautionary tale about the mortal sin of assumption. For Admiral Vance, the humiliation was profound and transformative. Later that day, she found Liam in the armory, meticulously cleaning his rifle as if it were a sacred object. There was no audience this time, no gallery of subordinates to impress. Her apology was stiff, formal, but sincere. "Master Chief," she said, her voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. "My assumptions were out of line. Unprofessional." There is no excuse. Liam didn't stop his work. He simply paused, looking up from the bolt carrier group he was polishing. His eyes held no judgment. "No, I told you so. We all make assumptions, ma'am," he said, his voice calm and even. "The important thing is to see the target for what it is." He then noticed her stance as she stood there. "If you shift your weight a little more onto the balls of your feet, ma'am, you'll get a more stable base for your transitions." It was a simple, professional courtesy, a small piece of technical advice from a master of the craft. That quiet act of mentorship, of sharing his competence instead of gloating in his victory, was a more powerful lesson than any formal reprimand could ever be. The legacy of that day began to solidify in tangible ways. The firing lane where Liam had performed his impossible feat was unofficially nicknamed Ghost Lane by the instructors. Trainees who were getting arrogant or sloppy were sent there to be humbled by the memory of what was possible. The paper target from his final 500-meter shot, the one with a single perfect hole dead center, was carefully removed from its holder. It wasn't thrown away, it was framed. It was mounted on the wall of the main training facility's ready room, a place where every SEAL candidate would see it. Beneath the framed target, a simple brass plaque was affixed. It didn't list his medals or his classified history. It simply read, MCPO Iron Ghost Carter. Perfection is the standard. Assumptions are the enemy. The younger SEALs, the same ones who had snickered at Vance's insults, now watched Liam with a newfound reverence. Later that week, they saw him leaving the base, his rifle bag slung over one shoulder. He was met at the gate by a small girl with bright pigtails who ran into his arms. He lifted her up, and the same hands that could place a perfect shot at 500 meters were now gently stroking his daughter's hair. The image was no longer one of weakness. It was a portrait of complete, profound strength, a warrior's discipline applied to a father's love. They finally understood. His quiet professionalism wasn't limited to the battlefield, it was the code by which he lived his entire life. A year passed. Rear Admiral Vance stood before a new class of BUD/S candidates, the hopefuls who had survived the grueling ordeal of Hell Week. She was still as demanding as ever, her standards still impossibly high, but something fundamental had changed within her. The brittle arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, resonant wisdom. During her keynote address on leadership, she walked her students over to the ready room wall and pointed to the framed target. Your greatest weapon will never be the rifle in your hands or the technology at your disposal, she told them, her voice ringing with hard-earned conviction. Your most critical asset is your ability to see past the surface. To recognize competence in any form, no matter how quiet or unassuming. Never, ever assume you are the most dangerous person in the room. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The true professional, the real threat, is always the one you underestimate. They don't need your approval. They don't need to announce their presence. Their results will speak for them. Liam Carter was still there, serving as a consultant, quietly shaping the next generation of warriors. His legacy wasn't in the redacted files or the medals locked away in a box. It was here, in the changed culture. It was in the lesson that had now become institutional doctrine, passed down from a wiser admiral to a new generation of SEALs. He had proven, without saying a word, that a warrior's true strength is not measured by the noise he makes. A legacy is not a list of accomplishments stored in a locked file or a row of ribbons pinned to a uniform. It is a lesson that echoes in the halls of the future, a standard that inspires others to be better. Liam Carter, the Iron Ghost, was more than a soldier, he was a principle made manifest. A quiet professional who taught an entire generation of elite warriors that the patient silence of a dedicated father could be more profound and more powerful than the chaotic roar of any battle. He demonstrated through simple, undeniable action that true worth is measured not by the volume of your voice or the weight of your rank, but by the precision of your impact and the quiet dignity you leave in your wake. His greatest mission was not fought in some distant, forgotten war zone, but on a simple firing range in Coronado, where he corrected not a target, but a culture, ensuring that the warriors of tomorrow would value substance over swagger and competence over charisma. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance and where a professional's actions define their worth, subscribe to Unknown Hero Stories.